and I'll give you the reference in a moment, you are now seeing explosive material called nanothermite found in the dust of the World Trade Center. 4 different samples of dust, they all have it. Total amount of this explosive material estimated between 10 and 100 tons, obviously planted in the buildings. This is the article. It's on the internet. It's in a mainstream peer-reviewed journal, the Open Chemical Physics Journal. Active thermitic material discovered in dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center catastrophe. 9 authors. Don't you think that this ought to be in the newspaper? Don't you think it ought to be on TV? Well, it was in Denmark, but it never made it here. I sent the press release and the article to the various editors at the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail, and as far as I know, there hasn't been one word. Not a word. What's that mean? Explosives found in the dust of World Trade Center 7? Amazing. Large amounts of explosive, which could have destroyed the building and which had no other possible purpose. Chemically analyzed by these people. Read the article. It's, again, available on the internet. Not worth reporting? You see, I'm not asking the Globe and Mail to agree with me. I don't care if they agree with me, but they have a duty to report this and to report the discussion and the debate, whether they agree with it or not. This is outrageous. So this is the latest major example of physical evidence. But of course we have lots of video evidence. We have these ejections from the building, of which there are many, as they go down. These 2 are probably mistimed, but the great majority of them were perfectly timed, as you can see in this video clip of the northeast corner of World Trade 1. I may play it twice. Watch down, all the way down the corner. I'm going to see if we can get this going. And now we'll see the same clip again in a closer view. Yeah, it's an interesting clip. We'll look at it once more. Why isn't that worth reporting? Why is it that we're not allowed to believe what we see in front of our eyes? Why is it that we have to distrust our own perception and our own intelligence? Well, says NIST, you can't deny the existence of these ejections. They're puffs of dust, says NIST. The top part of the building was coming down. This is called the piston hypothesis. Top part of the building acts like a piston. The building itself is like a cylinder, and it just forces all this air out. Well, that hypothesis has been pretty thoroughly demolished by Kevin Ryan in an article in the Journal of 9/11 Studies. But I do want to point out to you that there are other ways to test that hypothesis, and I myself have done so over the past year. I haven't published this yet, but I'll show you how we do it. We don't have to rely on our intuitions. Oh, gee, I think I'm seeing an explosive ejection. We can measure this stuff. It's not that difficult. So, using the same video clip, I was able to isolate one particular ejection. You see it here. We have quite precise times because we're using a video clip that we've broken up into measurable segments. And we follow this one ejection to its full size. So we have time quite accurately. We can also get distance. We can get the size of this ejection quite accurately because we can see the perimeter columns in the same frame. So we use a piece of software called screen calipers to measure the ejection. We find is 180 pixels. And we then, using the same frame, measure the perimeter columns and find that 180 pixels equals 17 columns. And from this we can compute the speed of the ejection. Indeed, we can create a profile showing its velocity and its acceleration. Here you see it over slightly more than a quarter of a second. Now, why is this important? It's important because we can then do the same thing with actual controlled demolitions and compare the ejections and the velocities and the acceleration in the two. And we can also measure several different ejections in a given tower and see how fast they are and whether they vary in the way they're supposed to. According to NIST's hypothesis, the piston hypothesis, the ejections at the bottom of the building should be much faster than those at the top because the air pressure is increasing as the piston comes down. And defenders of that hypothesis have been quite explicit about this. But what they haven't done is bother measuring the velocity of the ejections, which isn't that hard. They just don't want to do it. They don't want to measure it. They don't want to look. I've done it. This is the top ejection of the North Tower, the highest one I've been able to see. It can be measured. We can measure the speed of it. And this is the lowest one that we can see. So is the lowest one faster than the top one? No, it's actually slower. I'm not going to get into the details except to say that they vary between roughly 120 and 220 feet per second over the first quarter of a second. And that they are similar in terms of their overall acceleration to those in a controlled demolition. I'm looking at the King Dome in Seattle, although they're more vigorous and faster than the one in the controlled demolition using ordinary explosives. We don't have to depend upon our intuition. We can measure, we can look carefully, we can study. Why is it taboo to do so? Now, if you want to look at any of these things in more detail, here are some good websites: Journal of 9/11 Studies, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, Pilots for 9/11 Truth, Patriots Question 9/11. But I want to end with one more piece of evidence. This is how I'll conclude. This is, if I'm known for anything in the 9/11 truth movement, it would probably still be this piece of research, where I went through the 10,000 pages of firefighters' oral histories looking for references that the firefighters may have made to explosions at the time that the buildings began to come down. This is a segment in which the one firefighter is showing how it came down. He said it was like explosives had been planted to take down a building. And I thought I would just end with a few quotations from this collection. I'm not going to read you all 118 firefighters that referred to explosions at the time of the collapse of the towers. I'll just read you a few to give you the idea. And you should bear in mind when I read them that if these guys are right, that the towers, that there were major explosions at the time of the collapse. There's no room for these explosions in the official narrative at all, by the way. NIST doesn't want to go there. 9/11 Commission doesn't want to go there. If these guys are right, then the official narrative is wrong. If the official narrative is wrong, we're in Afghanistan as part of a fraud. And that's why these guys are important. All the way around, like a belt, all these explosions. A tremendous explosion and tremendous shaking of our building. You saw the one floor explode on itself. Like on television where they blow up these buildings. A synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. Flash, flash, flash. Boom, 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 boom. Shook my bones. Sucked all the oxygen out of the air. Like someone had planted explosives. Like a million firecrackers. Every floor went choo, choo, choo. Like it was a timed explosion. This huge explosion. About 10 explosions, a large section of it blasting out. Boom! A massive explosion. Crackling explosive, a wall. Exploded from about midway up the building. Whole top came off like a volcano. A very, very tremendous explosion and a very heavy wind. Exactly the way it looks when they show you these implosions on TV. A giant, giant explosion. In my mind, it was a bomb. This huge explosion. I just went flying maybe 30, 40 feet. It was like shrapnel, like a huge, enormous explosion. Everything shook. Ever see professional demolition? Pop, 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 like bombs going off, like boom, 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 and then just a huge wind. The sound was deafening. The street was bouncing like a trampoline. Huge mushroom cloud, a horrendous noise. What the hell blew up? My ears were like deaf. They sounded like bombs. bombs. They sounded like bombs. Well, see, the thing is, I don't think they're all wrong. I actually think these folks know more about explosions than most of us. And that if over 150 people, and there were certainly, I've got over 150 witnesses of various sorts, saw or otherwise perceived explosions at the time of the collapse, then the most simple hypothesis is they're right. They're right. There were explosions. And that's what brought down the buildings. And that means the official story is wrong. It's either a fairy tale or a myth. And I'm tired of being told we're supposed to believe it. Thank you.